We did it, Joe.
We defeated fascism by voting it out. Hey, Democrats, have you had a nice hibernation? Good, because it's time to check in and see how your compassionate, tolerant, honorable Democratic politicians have been saving America. Daddy Biden and the Democrats promised police reform. Oopsie. The majority of them, like their Republican counterparts, are giving cops more funding, adding more of them to combat crime caused by failures of government policy. And they're continuing to arm them with military gear. He and the Queen cop also promised weed reform. Sorry, peasants, he's too busy. He can't be bothered to help remedy the devastating consequences of the war on drugs that he's literally personally responsible for exacerbating. Daddy Biden and the Democrats reduced costs of living like food. Ooh, spoke too soon on that one. And despite establishment media propaganda, inflation, spurred by both Trump and Biden's astronomical spending in the last couple of years, as well as decades of reckless spending, hurts the poor the most. Do you think the rich are struggling over increased milk and gas prices? Good thing Biden and the Democrats and the Republicans who work with them are spending a bunch more money to help the poor, who will pay for it for generations, both via government debt and the inevitable inflation caused by pumping infinite currency into the economy. Some of that spending is definitely going to ending Trump's cruel border policies, though, right? Wait, no. Biden and the Democrats and Republicans who fund the federal government have collectively allowed the continuation of stealing land for Trump's border wall, extended Title 42 to hinder asylum, a basic fundamental human right, and moved kids from cages into, wait for it, cramped and dehumanizing shelters, which are definitely not cages. Migrants have been deported in record numbers, but hey, Biden said his administration was going to investigate the whipping of Haitians after Border Patrol agents were caught abusing them. Progress! Go back to sleep, Blue no matter whose. You're the good team. Sure, Joe made the right move by ending the war in Afghanistan, a quagmire he helped start and then ended in true American form by killing civilians with the perpetrators facing zero repercussions. U.S. airstrikes may have decreased, but Biden and the Democrats and their alleged Republican enemies are still approving astronomical military spending, with their right to indefinitely detain you grandfathered into their annual death bill. Oh, and by the way, JK on Biden ending the war in Afghanistan. He's still waging war, this time economically, with sanctions that are starving the Afghan people. Speaking of continuing imperial authoritarian policies from past presidents who are in bed with cronies, Biden chose a Raytheon board member to lead the Department of Defense. Raytheon, you know, the state dependents who made billions building war machines for hope and change and then making America great again. And also, who cares anyway, because Obama made warmongering and a track record of killing civilians with drone strikes 90% of the time very cool, haha. Still speaking of imperial authoritarianism and other Trump policies and hypocrisies, because Jesus Christ, they're all toxic clowns, Biden promised to withdraw U.S. support for the extremist Saudi regime's slaughter of Yemen. And he's arming them, and he's claiming it's only for defense. You know, like America's self-defense wars he voted to support and fund. The Democrats were at least going to save freedom of the press after Trump nearly destroyed it. Wait, nope. Biden's trying to extradite Julian Assange for exposing imperial brutality during the Bush administration, all based on the Trump administration's charges against him, in a move that sets a dangerous precedent for the safety and freedom of journalists and the press. Hey, he may have no regard for humanity, peace, accountability, and principle, but at least he created all those jobs after Democrats destroyed them and businesses across the country and coercively dictated when they could reopen. Not sure that counts. The Democrats have also pushed vaccine passports and mandates, forcing businesses to require proof of vaccination in the name of safety, at the expense of bodily autonomy, as well as minorities who are vaccinated at lower rates than white people. This is also at the expense of science, which has demonstrated for months that vaccinated people can also catch and spread COVID at significant rates and appear to have been doing just that quite robustly. See, the liberal utopia of Los Angeles and California at large. None of this is to say that Trump was a good president. Regardless of his supporters' declarations, he's still a shameless, manipulative, warmongering authoritarian like every president who came before. I don't blame anyone for wanting him out of office. However, if you jumped when the media said jump, screeched and raged when the blue team commanded it, and patted yourself on the back for checking a box supporting a known establishment politician responsible for some of the worst policies that continue to affect innocent people today, if you celebrated defeating evil only to shrug at it when the blue team does it with better marketing, you have been conditioned to believe in power and party over principle, just like your sworn enemies. And in protesting about how the other team is so much worse, also like your sworn enemies, you're actually a mirror reflection of that enemy. You're both caught in a delusional fantasy where a piece of paper over 2 centuries old can protect you from the harm and tyranny others would impose upon you using the force of the state. As it turns out, voting is not an effective way to hold your masters accountable, considering how many destructive and freedom-quashing policies have been continued and accelerated for decades. Far more effective would be taking action without the state to solve problems the state very likely created or at least exacerbated, or at least not rationalizing blatantly hypocritical policies that violate your values for the sake of pacifying your conscience and ego with the lesser evil game. If you want to actually be the resistance you claim to be during the Trump years, relying on the bought and paid for politicians with track records of causing systemic systemic harm to do the work for you makes you a willing and willfully ignorant accomplice in perpetuating it. Actual solutions include not relying on government policy and action, but engaging in community support and projects to directly help those who need it, making decisions in your everyday life that loosen the grip of violative state authority, ignoring or defying unjust regulations and laws. And most importantly, if you ever want a just, cooperative, peaceful world, disabuse yourself of the belief that this imaginary authority underpinned by violence can create it despite thousands of years demonstrating the contrary. How long are you going to keep rationalizing policies and behaviors that violate the very core of your most cherished principles? Also, you can say you beat the other guy and feel good about yourself, when in fact this very system of beating each other perpetuates the conditions you fear the most.